another episode of Yes and Ask Me, where I get to interview senior level players about, and I am going to mute my Twitch, senior level players about cool stuff going on in the improv community. Now, normally, in our past shows, I've been talking to people here in the San Antonio area. We're based out of Bexar Stage here in San Antonio, and I've been asking a lot of my friends that are senior level players here. But today's going to be a bit of a special day. Today's theme is women in comedy. And I'll be asking a couple players from outside of the San Antonio community. But first, I want to introduce Tina Jackson, owner of Bear Stage, and one of the panel members. Hey, Tina, how's it going?
Rick, happy to be here.
It's so glad, so glad. Again, owner and creative director. What is it?
Director.
Oh, okay, fair enough, great, awesome, sweet. Great, I'm gonna go ahead and bring out the rest of my guests, and then I'm gonna start picking their brains immediately. Next, I'd like to introduce Kaci Beeler out of Hideout Theater in Austin, Texas. Kaci, hey Kaci. Kaci, you are part of a group that I was told to pronounce P-graph, but it has a longer name.
Parallelogram of phonograph, P-graph for short. Yes.
Okay,
P-graph, it's fine.
Fantastic. Next, I want to introduce Lindsay Goldapp, who is the co-founder and artistic director of Stomping Ground Comedy out of Dallas, Texas.
Trying to make that really like, oh, it's the moment.
Hey, Lindsay, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, okay, so today's theme is women in comedy. And we don't just have like any women, they just like randomly picked women from these improv areas of Texas. I know.
You're doing so well.
You're doing great, Rick.
From the improv communities in San Antonio, Austin, and Dallas. Quickly, I want to go around the room and get a quick background of how many years you've been doing comedy or improv or whatever. Tina, let's start with you.
So I'm in my 20th year of improv. I started in Chicago for like 10 years, and I moved to San Antonio about 4 years ago. I opened Bear Stage 3 years ago. So I've been doing improv since I was a teenager. And that's all I'll say.
Oh, fantastic. Kaci, give us some background about your experience with improv.
Yeah, I've been doing improv for, I guess, about 20 years now. I started when I was a teenager in high school or like middle school. And I've been doing stuff in Austin on a weekly basis since 2005. And I also travel and perform and teach nationally and internationally. And I've been to like 65 cities and 8 countries or something.
Yeah,
to do that over the past 15 years. And my group P-graph, we're a quartet ensemble, 2 women, 2 men, and we've been together for almost 15 years. So I travel with them, but I also travel solo. Yeah.
I love that. And by the way,
I create all kinds of shows, and I also have a theater company I forgot to mention called American Berserk Theater, where we write our own original plays using improv. And yeah, I produce a lot of stuff, direct a lot of stuff, produce a lot of shows. A lot of stuff at the Hideout Theater in Austin.
And
I
casually keeps on adding like really incredible things to the list.
Yeah, I know.
Oh yeah, also I'm a doctor.
Also I'm a doctor and no, not a doctor. Was I gonna say?
You're very casual about it though, Kaci.
It's such a weird thing to be like, oh yeah, oh, and I was the director of design at the Hideout Theater for 10 years. So I helped the Hideout transition to new ownership, and then did that did all the design work for the theater for 10 years. I still do stuff for them, but now it's more on like a contractor basis. Oh, and Roy said in the chat, and she has a puppy. I do.
Hi, Roy.
All right, Lindsay, time to share your resume with us.
No, I don't like that. That's pressure.
excited. Oh,
No, it is funny though. It's a coincidence. We all are at about the 20-year mark.
we're at like 20 years, yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Because I also started in 2001 in college, and then improvised in Dallas for a while, then went and trained in Chicago at Second City, spent 6 years there, and then came back to Dallas to open Stomping Ground, the nonprofit, sorry, little background noise, to open a nonprofit here in Dallas. And I've been back here since 2012, 2013. And I perform sketch, improv, musical improv, a little bit of everything. And I don't want to, I don't want to start listing things. It's silly.
No, you can do it.
We've all done a lot. We've all done a lot of crazy, amazing things.
Yeah.
And
What I
I'm-
will say is that like I'm so delighted to be on this panel today because like both of these women are like I'm such fans of their work on stage and off. I think they're both kick-ass women.
Thank you.
It's a nice panel to be part of. Some badass ladies.
Yeah, this is great.
Yes.
Oh, I'm super
Yes.
excited about this, and this is such an interesting topic too. So, Tina, let's start with you.
Okay.
The topic of today's discussion is women in comedy. Would you give us just maybe like what's the temperature right now of women in comedy in the world?
Yeah, good. A lot of pressure. Women
In a
comedy,
nutshell.
like yeah, in a nutshell, I will speak on behalf of everyone. Just real quick, women in comedy has been like a topic of discussion forever. But you know, we have been through quite a roller coaster, I think, in the last even couple of years, but certainly over the last decade, I would say, where women were not always looked at as equals in the improv community or the comedy community in general. There was a hashtag for a while and like some things that went out that were pretty unpleasant as far as like women aren't funny and like blah, blah, blah. But the truth is women are funny, and a lot of this has been oppression from the community in general that's sort of silenced some voices and made us all like moms and girlfriends and wives and not necessarily given us our own space to like fully identify within the community. And I'm not going to say that that's all in the past. I think that's stuff that we're all still, especially if you've been in the community for a while, like stuff that we're all still dealing with a little bit.
Mhm.
But in the era of Me Too, like moving forward from some of this unpleasant stuff, like I think women are demanding a little bit more space and are being given a little bit more space to fully discover, I think, kind of for the first time, some of the identity that men have been able to explore for quite a while. So I think right now we're at a really exciting time in the world of like women in comedy, where when you're talking about comedy, you're talking about Tina Fey and Amy Poehler and Maya Rudolph and like a bunch of people.
Yeah.
You are also talking about men, but you are also including some like really kick-ass women who are giving us some stepping stones to be able to, in our smaller communities, be able to step in and be the funny one in the room, where we were not always given the space to be the class clown before. So I think it's a really exciting time where we're on the threshold of a bunch of things, and women are able to take the wheel a little bit more and explore and really discover kind of what our voice is going to be, or both individually and as a collective of women.
Yeah. You've
No,
got
that's
such
interesting.
a great heyday too of women in comedy still coming through, and with more streaming platforms, there's more room for more. There's just like literally more room for more voices, because it's not like, oh, there's 24 hours in a day and we can only fill it up with so many programming or so many channels. Now it's like a lot more people can have a whole show out there. So then you get Aquafina with a great show, Tiffany Haddish with a great comedy special. I was thinking about some things I just recently was just scrolling through, and I was like, there's so much more to pick from, and people can choose when to watch it. So we have less of this like, oh, well, we have to put this sort of thing primetime television because this is our main viewership. You can't really have that argument is is becoming less and less valid as people are moving to streaming platforms, and people are choosing at any moment, any time of day what they want to watch. And I think that's just showing people what was already there, which was like a lot of talented voices coming into the mix, and that there's an audience for those voices. And now it's like, it's kind of undeniable because those shows get views and they have popularity and they keep getting made because more people want them. So it's sort of awesome that along with the Me Too movement, we've had this move into a different way of viewing entertainment. I think the more we have that, the more we can use our live stages to do something similar, which is to, show diverse range of voices and perspectives.
Yeah.
Over the last 20, it's really interesting to be for us in our timeline in the last 20 years. Like early aughts were like, Amy Poehler, Tina Fey, and people were going, oh my gosh, these not only are these women funny, I think they're exactly as funny, if not funnier than the men.
Yeah.
And it was like 10 years before that, in the early 90s, when people were watching SNL or watching whatever, they never would have been like, the woman's actually the funniest person in the cast.
Mm-hmm.
But we got there, and and like all of us in this group have benefited from that. And I try to like be very grateful for the women who like went. I know we've all been through a lot as far as being women in this business, but the ones who went before us, man, what did they go through?
The fucking 90s, God.
Yeah,
damn.
honestly, 90s comedy, unbelievable amounts of bullshit.
I know. I try to keep that in mind, and like look at and compare it to my own journey. And I look at the strides that we've made over the past 20 years, 10 years, 5 years, and we just keep going farther. When I was in classes in Chicago, 15 years ago, there were like 2 or 3 women in my class, and it almost felt like the instructor was like trying to make all the women cry and get us out of class.
Right.
And like now, that would not be tolerated.
Oh no. Even if people believe that now, it's shameful now to feel like women aren't or couldn't be as funny as men. And I think that's another thing that's changed, is like now the men who feel that way are being shamed.
Yes. It's like when you can compare it to like a racial prejudice. Now people who are racist know like, oh no. If you're racist now, you better shut up.
You can't say it, it's not okay.
Right. Whereas it used to be like, we'd kind of go, oh, that was racist, but you know what? Frank has his ways of thinking, and I'm just going to let him, say it. And now we're just like, no, you need to shut up.
No, you can't let it slide anymore.
Yeah. And it's kind of comparable with that sort of like misogyny and chauvinism, where we're just like, no, socially, no, we're not on board anymore. That's not.
I find it funny a little bit.
Sorry to any Franks out there. I don't know why I named the racist Frank.
Sorry, Frank.
Not fair.
You're racist. But I find it a little funny sometimes in San Antonio, because it's a much younger improv scene than Austin or Dallas, and much younger than any other experience that I've ever had in another improv community.
Dude, somehow Austin is like light years ahead of both of our cities. Yeah. But then Dallas is like a little bit farther ahead for sure. Yeah. And then San Antonio is like this little baby.
We're a little baby improv community right now, and we're growing. So sometimes
I hear people, sorry to interrupt. I hear people Austin people put it in the tier with New York and LA and Chicago sometimes. And I'm like,
Austin.
You go,
girls.
It's cool. I feel like it's because Austin, I think there was a part where it all should have gone away and would have had to start over from scratch, but somehow the Hideout Theater hung on during those really rocky years between like the 90s boom and then there was a decline. I don't know. There was like that post-comedy sports decline. Yeah. Where like comedy sports was kind of king, and it was like there was a big comedy sports theater in Austin. I think it was like in a mall.
Which is so funny to me. There's nothing less Austin than comedy sports.
Yeah, you think about it, you're like, it doesn't make make sense either. I'm sure I'd insult somebody by saying that. But yeah, I agree. I remember knowing about,
or something.
Yeah, it makes Round Rock perfect. but yeah, for Austin, it's nice that the Hideout was around since 1999. They had been in other spaces like until they got that space, and then there was like, a 2-year like, wow, this is really working. And then like all these things happened. And if there hadn't been a lease going on and a very bare bones, like 2 classes happening a week, 1 show a week thing going on, I think it would have just plummeted. But instead, there was a really nice, they did like a co-op thing for a while when I was first getting involved to keep it going.
So you guys are so lucky. You have hippies, you know? I don't have those.
And we have we have a lot of that. We got that vibe.
Industry. Yeah. Dallas seems to be because of the lack of hippies.
Dallas is we're somewhere in the middle. We're
So big. Dallas is the Dallas Fort Worth area is so flipping huge. It's massive.
crazy. It's crazy. All right, sorry, Tina. I interrupted you like literally 10 minutes ago.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. What I was gonna say is.
Can we back the train
And
up?
there's also somebody who asked a question in the chat if we ever want to.
Oh yeah.
Look at
Oh,
that.
I definitely want to answer that.
How
too.
dare
That's a
they?
good
But I'm
question.
still talking. Thank you, Clint. As a young community, sometimes I come in like with this hard kind of like, I've been described a little bit as a ball buster sometimes, where I come in with this like super feminist stance on things where I was like, this will not happen this way. We will not let these things happen. And people are like, Tina, relax. Nobody was doing this. And I was like, oh yeah, I forget. Like, I forget that you as a young community don't understand some of the things that like we all went through. And so I think one of my like favorite things about the San Antonio community being as young as it is, because there's so many challenges accompanied with it, building an audience and teaching people what to expect out of an improv show. But one of the things I love so much is that we were able to start on sort of this feminist note, because I came from a place of like, we're not going to make any of these mistakes. These are mistakes that I'm going to prevent by creating an HR policy and like making sure that women have the same opportunities as men, are not looked down on. We're not really endorsing like the white male improviser team that exists everywhere, right? The one of like 5 dudes in plaid shirts and Converse shoes who all
We love you, white dudes in plaid shirts. We love you.
We love them.
Classes.
But thank you for paying for our classes. But we're not like super putting these people necessarily always on the front lines of our advertisements and our this isn't like the pinnacle of our product, right? We're celebrating diverse voices, and we always have, and we're always trying to like farm and encourage and create like shows that have representation in them, because I'm coming from this place of experience. And everybody's like, Tina, you're pushing so hard for this, but like, we're not fighting you on it, which is great. You know, that's a blessing for my community, but
I agree. I agree. I you know, that was one of the first thing I did was hire a musical director. That was my first move. My second was like, you need a good musical director. And then my second move was like, I'm going to start writing the discrimination sexual harassment policy. And I think one great benefit from that is that, and Tina, this will be sort of a mirror to your experience, is that I came from these communities that had already, where improv had been around for so long already. And it was just it was assumed, yes, of course you'll have a sexual harassment policy. Of course you'll have a process for reporting. Of course we know we need these things. And
where do you find that?
But what was great about it is that, so I knew that we would do that when we opened 3 years ago, and it I'm gonna say inspired some of the other institutions that were in Dallas to make their policies more robust, that had not thought to add one because they were sort of
or hadn't updated them in years.
Yeah, or either they didn't have them, or they weren't very robust, or they were just sort of like, okay, it's there, but we're not really enforcing it. So it kind of, it pushed everybody to get on board and everybody to get on the same page as of oh, this is not, these are the things that aren't acceptable. So I'm glad.
That is a great thing about running your own space or being in the management of a space. It's nice because a lot of the other things about managing a space or a business is really fucking hard and terrible. So hard. But the wonderful things is when you can set a precedent, and you can set a precedent for, you know, treating each other well and saying thank you and positivity, and even things more lately like pronouns, stuff that is not happening in Europe. It's not happening in Asia. Oh, believe me. Like I go to these places and I'm like, it blows my mind that you could think that Texas could be so progressive in this
Comparatively,
way.
yeah.
You know, like absurdly ahead of the curve in a lot of ways in our improv, as far as being more inclusive, using inclusive language, and having inclusive policies. People they find that hard to believe.
But Kaci, what you're essentially saying is that the only reason why we're able to do this is because we have women in leadership positions right now in these theaters.
I wouldn't say the only reason.
Yeah.
I wouldn't
It's
say
hard,
the
but yeah,
reason.
it's not the only reason, but it helps a lot.
It helps a lot to see women at the top of their game, like playing for a community and like setting a precedent that there's like a beautiful trickle down that happens when you see women at the top of their game playing without permission, you know, like playing without limits and
without regard.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Just
without regard, just like playing their hearts out and just being the best. It gives other women sort of the permission to do so. Sort of the oh, if they can do it, I can do it. You know, it's visibility too. The more
also think
on stage, the more women who come to classes because they find it more accessible.
I don't know if this happened for y'all. I would actually be curious to know. But I also found that when there is a woman in leadership, you quickly sort of gosh, what is a really tactful way to put this? The line is sort of drawn.
I was going to say, I bet I know where you're going with this. Yes.
You either have these wonderful men who are like, yeah, 100%, I'm on board with this woman.
Of course, why wouldn't I?
And then you have the men who are like, what about my rights? And
yeah, I'm going to challenge you on everything you do, because I don't believe at a core level that a woman could be competent to do the job you're doing.
Exactly. I love that so much because, yeah, I've encountered that too. Lesser in San Antonio than I have in other places because, you know, I came in and kind of busted down a door to open my business. And people, I think, a base level respect me. Even if they don't like me, they respect me for being able to do that. It
was just nice to see, like, oh, there are some men who are on board, and we surround ourselves with amazing men.
Oh my God, I do, for sure.
Surround themselves with amazing men. Mm-hmm. And then the men who are not cool with that, it's hard, like, to sometimes to say goodbye to friends and people we love, but
I've done it.
I mean, like, ultimately something I think when I'm like casting a show, and it's true for like building a community, but like I want to walk into this space and see people that light me up, not people that make me cringe and I feel like I have to walk on eggshells around them to be.
Oh my God, being a pleasant person to be around is such a fucking blessing to a community.
Yeah.
Being a baseline good human person.
Just somebody who's like,
or sexuality or gender.
Yes,
I don't care.
Absolutely.
But like putting good people on stage really matters, and making that space available to good people of whatever you look like or act like or are, I think is always the key.
I would say, like us moving forward as like improv communities and as a worldwide improv community, I'm seeing less prizing like the funniest or loudest in the room, which is how it really was coming out of like 90s comedy. Somebody could be kind of a dick, kind of a jerk, kind of an asshole. Say asshole because that's more gender neutral. More of an asshole backstage.
Gender
funny
neutral.
On stage. Yeah.
Gender neutral, fucking demeaning terms. Asshole. Everybody can be an asshole.
Everyone can be an asshole. So like, a lot of people could be assholes, like a little bit on stage, off stage for sure. But if they were really funny, I feel like they would still get a platform regularly and people would make excuses for them. Whereas now I think we've realized, oh, the work is so much richer when we, people the stage with pleasant people who take notes well, who have different points of view, and who like to play well together. It just like, it doesn't matter. It's like, I was happy to do away with the couple of like supremely funny guys who got validation their whole life that they were funny by being the class clown and never getting in trouble, in order to get some of the quieter, shyer people who are just like funny as hell and like flying under the radar because they never quite had a platform. They were like, as women, I don't know, told to be quiet, close your legs,
Yeah, cross
know,
your knees. Yeah.
Cross your knees, keep your thoughts to yourself. That's not ladylike behavior. And I know that, and I know that's true for a lot of people of color. Like, don't stand out. You know, keep quiet, or stick to this, stick to that. Don't go there. That's not for you. And over time, it's like, how can we make people feel like, oh, this stage in which anything can happen and the script is our own and the characters are our own really should be for anyone. How do you make it welcoming for anyone?
Yeah. And I think something you were saying reminds me of the question I did see in the chat from Clint that says, are developing markets like Texas more available to women improvisers more than an established market like New York or LA? And I think what you were saying very much addresses that, where I think in New York or LA, it's really just like whoever's the funniest, noisiest, loudest, bawdiest, like really gets seen.
I think it's still true, honestly.
I think that's still really true in the big markets because they don't have to, in their minds, maybe pander to the diversity quotient or whatever. They're really just looking for loud talent, like talent that you can definitely see.
Well, it's a funnel. It's a funnel. It's an entertainment industry funnel. Whereas a community in a smaller town is a community for the love of the art form. Maybe there's a tiny funnel, but like, not really.
Where's it going, right? And so I think in general, in the smaller markets, I think it's easier to make these changes, to make this space available, to make these voices heard and be attentive to those kinds of things that I think in smaller communities, rather than some of the New York and LA scenes, really will see a little bit more of a diverse population because they're more open, because that change can happen at a smaller level. I think to overhaul New York, LA, Chicago is much harder because there's so much institution involved. And they're in the business of comedy at this point. They didn't start this way necessarily, but they're in this way. This opportunity right now in front of them is to make money. They're making money off of comedy, and they don't care whose money they get.
I agree. And I think for us, it sort of became what I said about you're kind of either you're on board with this progressive, colorful, diverse community, or you're not. What I said about that and the staff also applies to the performers and the audience. So I think that, you know, every one of these developing markets sort of has both. You have a place where if you just want to go see white people on stage, you totally can.
Of course you can.
If you want to go see, or if you want to be a white person on stage, like there is probably a place for you. And then if you want to be in a different kind of community, what we're saying in these developing communities is, hey, we've also got a place for you. And so I think that there are options. And I think that you're right, Tina. I think that in LA, New York, Chicago, it's so much more focused on the business and funneling that into network TV or to the stage. And for us, it's like, we're local. We like being local, and we're one option for you. And if you don't like this option, like, there's
keep going.
Keep going, man.
Go to Fluger. What did we say earlier? Go to Round Rock.
You go to Round Rock.
Round Rock. You're great, Round Rock. We love you.
Yeah, there's places for you. A white man in comedy there will always be room for a white man in comedy.
It's
always.
Fine. It's fine.
And I know there's a lot of white men who feel like that's not true anymore. And I
really do.
I think it's just like, you know, if you wanted to be like, say, I want to be in these diverse spaces, but I want a place for myself. It's like, you have to work harder than you did 15 years ago. You definitely
100%.
Like, I've seen that for sure. Like, when we're casting a show, the white men count is like one of the least we try to keep that number low, honestly. So you have to be really good on stage and off.
But that's the way it used to be for women, is to get on a fucking
And they don't
airplane.
see.
Yeah.
And the wrong men don't see that correlation. They just go, I am being discriminated against. But the wonderful men that we surround ourselves with go, I have to try, and I have to try real hard. And that's what they've had to do their entire careers. And that's okay.
And I've had beautiful, amazing white men who have auditioned for our shows and not like made it in have been like, you know what, that's a great cast. And that is what I respect so much about a young community, that we're teaching these values rather than teaching the resentment of, we used to have something and now we don't, you know, minorities took it away from us, versus like, we're all growing together. And it's like, man, that was a good cast. Like, I didn't get cast and I'm bummed about it, but like, that's a good cast that you made.
Love that.
And I'm gonna keep working on
you
it,
can
you
add that
know?
man to your circle.
I know, and yes, exactly. See,
You got another great man.
a beautiful man. Love him.
So what you guys are saying is that you're creating a more egalitarian space. And you're actually slowly removing all the privilege that some people have had for a long time.
Trying to be aware of it, and trying to be like cognizant of the biases in society that it sucks. So it's a really weird dichotomy to grow up being told, you know, you can do anything, you can be anything. Oh, here we are in 2020, not fucking true. What a fucking lie, disgusting. And then be like, well, where can we try to give people an actual voice and kind of create the world where we can play together? And I don't know, it seems even more important than ever now to me, to create these spaces for open creativity and connection, that goes beyond the really terrible societal expectations. And
I think
capitalism is using us so hard all the time, and it's exploiting us, and there's so much fascism to take it there, but that's true. And
here we go. Here she goes,
like,
guys.
I'm going there. And
she's wearing overalls and she's talking about fascism.
God damn it. And it's just like, well, where are the spaces where we can live the authentic lives that we want to live? Hopefully it's in our tiny shitty improv theaters.
Yeah, right. I love that so much.
That tickled me.
Like I've never made this connection before, but just now, Kaci, when you were talking, despite the fact that it was like just perfectly worded, but it goes back to that, maybe it's Gandhi, maybe it's Buddha, I don't know, somebody beautiful and in the past. Like, be the change you wish to see in the world. And it's like, I can't change the world. I can't. I can vote. I can make my voice heard as loud as I can on Facebook. I can attend a rally or write to my senator in Republican red ass Texas. But like, what I can do to change the world is affect my small community.
My little shitty, I can make my little shitty improv theater really great.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. I was like, we're really just doing the best we can to create the world that we want as a whole within these smaller communities. And I think, you know,
and affect a lot of people over time, and then hopefully they go on, and that just spreads. And it is top down. I mean, it is top down leadership wise, which is why another reason to have female leadership and POC leadership, and in every aspect. And it can get tricky sometimes, because you might have to take a more qualified cis white person and be like, hey, we're gonna put you on the back burner for teaching or directing while we lift these other people up, because we need to we want more diverse voices. It's gonna take longer, and so we're gonna prioritize certain things because we want that long term.
And that's certainly like the hard part of leadership, is telling somebody who's completely qualified for something, hey, we're gonna go with somebody else because of a reason that's out of your control, right? Like, it's not your fault that you're white, but we have to elevate and diversify our player pool, our teacher pool, our management pool, to reach wider audiences too, to create the world that we want. And it's not always something that people want to hear, but in the end, isn't it better to be creating those spaces at the expense of maybe these one or two people who may not understand? And that's hard. It's hard to do as a person in leadership, as somebody who has historically, or like, gender wise, like been told to like be amiable and make everybody happy. And, like we're taught these like feminine values that are like, don't make waves and make everybody happy and set a nice table. But sometimes you got to make these hard choices and have these hard conversations. And I know that's the most challenging part of my job. And I don't love it, but I know sometimes that it has to happen. And that's the burden of leadership, regardless
It's
of
like my entire job is making waves.
what.
And people will hate you for it, you know, like people will really fucking hate you.
I'll tell you what.
So
Literally,
And the people
literally
on the
all I
back-
do is make waves, field complaints, and get hated.
Yes.
Oh,
And
that's the job.
it is the job. And it's like, I was talking to,
But I love it. But
I
I
was
love
talking to
it.
a friend today about like, I think the 3 people in the world that like really hate me. And I was like, and they're all cis straight people. And that doesn't mean that that's like why I hate them or they hate me or like why that hatred happens. But it's like the people I've disappointed are people I've said no to when I've been establishing boundaries about what I want.
Okay, well, I must be really blessed, Tina, because I have like a really diverse pool of people who hate me.
Well, that's phenomenal. How diverse
Thank
of
you.
Cool.
I work very hard at my job. I'm very good at my job.
Yes.
So just to be clear,
What was your question?
well, not really a question. Well, so you're not saying that there's no place for a cis white male in these improv communities. What you're saying is that these different roles that you're talking about, a director, a producer, a performance role, that they have to be shared. And what you guys in leadership positions are doing is trying to lift up the entire community and not just pick individuals and say these folks are always going to be on top.
No,
Yes.
yeah,
Well,
exactly.
and I think you have to break down those. We have a philosophy, and I have to give a shout out to Jill Bernard at Huge Theater, where yes, we love her. And her policies on diversity and philosophies on diversity and inclusion are like, I use them all the time.
Legendary, yeah. They shaped our HR policy for sure.
Yeah. So it's about understanding what got us here in the first place. So, I mean, there's a reason why the community was cis white male for so long. And it's because of all these barriers that kept people from diverse backgrounds and women and all kinds of people from having the same opportunities. So it's about starting really at that foundational level and like breaking down those barriers. What are they? Is it money? Is it transportation? Is it access? Is it is it your job? What is it? And how can we help you start at level 1? So then we don't actually, so then you go through our program for free. We support you the whole way and give you a support system. And then at the end, you are as qualified as that cis white male that's up for that same job. So it's really about starting at that base level and breaking down those barriers so that we can diversify as a whole. And it's a long game. That's what's hard about it.
Yep.
It's not
You
instant.
see results right away.
Yes. And people are just like, well, why don't we, why isn't it more diverse? And why don't we have, because it takes time to do it well. It really does.
You don't want to throw somebody into a leadership role too soon either. And they need a lot of, everybody who goes into that kind of role needs a lot of support and different kinds of support based on how they best learn, how they best are cheer-led. Not everybody likes the same thing. And it's hard to do that with the program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm proud of how far we've come. And it's not perfect. It's going to take time. But when I compare my training center and the instructor pool or the performer pool or the student population to say those same things for me 15 years ago, oh my gosh, we've come leaps and bounds. And that's not to say that we're done, but it's to say like, I recognize the progress and then I recognize the ways that we have to go.
Right. Like I see for sure in my training center, most of our teaching staff are cis people. And that's not something that I've ever done intentionally. It's just, in a growing community, that's who's qualified. And that's not something that I intend to keep. But that's something that I have a mindful and watchful eye on. I'm not doing everything perfectly. I'm not doing everything the way that I want to long game wise. because I've got a growing improv community, I've got to train the people who I want to teach. I've got to train the people who I want to step into some of those leadership roles. Right now, who is qualified and who is at the leadership of my theater are a lot of cis white people. And I'm not, necessary. I'm proud of each of those individual people. I think they're all super qualified and they're doing a great job. And I love who I have like in my staff. I love them. But in the long run, is that the plan? Not necessarily. And
It'll take time and you'll get there.
and
But then you have your thumb on it, so you're like that way. Every little choice you make down the road, from like diversity scholarships to like who gets to TA, that makes a big difference.
Sure, for sure. And
Yeah.
I'm much more willing to make those concessions to diversify the community than I am to specifically just put the best quality whatever on my programming. Is that I want to encourage those female improv teams. I want to encourage the LGBT teams and the players and the people who are involved in those to really bring them up and give them leadership roles when the opportunity presents itself and when they feel ready and when I feel ready, like when we feel safe and comfortable to do so.
Can I just say that, so our leadership structure, we have like obviously a board of directors because we're a nonprofit, but then below that we have these directors that each kind of runs a different wing. Somebody runs the therapeutic wing, and then we have I'm artistic, then we have training center, we have operations. So we have this team, this director team, and all of them are women except for one. Can I just say, and he's cool.
What is it like?
He's good with us. It is just like, God, they're so amazing. And just working with a group of, I thrive in like working with groups of women, and working with them is just like such a joy. I have to shout out to them. We have one man who's like, yeah, I'm good with this. All these gals, yeah, they're cool. They do a good job.
Honestly, they earned it. They're here. We're all doing the same job.
Yeah.
Hey, folks. I want to end on that note because that's such a lovely note to end on. A board of directors is almost entirely women. That's fantastic. Yeah, we're actually out of time, but I just want to highlight some of the amazing things that we heard today. Women in leadership positions, making huge strides in the world of comedy. Tina, you mentioned earlier how women really just needed the space. And it sounds to me like you guys are getting more of that space. Kaci, you mentioned that even online and this new technology that we have is allowing women to actually show how good they are without those gatekeepers that have always been there to like not allow them to really show that.
Women and people of color, yeah, definitely.
I think the conversation, what I'm realizing
and
more
LGBTQ, I want to say
about the community is that the fight for women in comedy is also the fight for POC, is also the fight for LGBT representation. Our three white women who are sitting here on a panel talking about that, but like we're talking about diversity in general, right? Like taking some of the privilege that has been given innately to men or innately to straight people or innately to white people and diversifying it. And I think really the conversation about women in comedy is about diversity in comedy because it really should be fluid that way. I mean, it really should be everybody's fight to include everybody.
This is one part of it.
And we talk about, like different in abilities, different ways of thinking, different ages, different body types. I mean, like talk about diversity on stage and you could go, so there's so much more than just visible, like what we think is your gender, your visible gender and your skin color. There's so much more.
You want to have us for 3 more hours, Rick?
I know, there's so much to talk about.
It's the 3 more hours.
Yeah,
I'm sure. Yeah, and there's no reason why, just like cutting a scene in an improv show, there's no reason why we can't keep coming back to women in comedy over and over again.
Rick, you know it, girl.
I want to thank my panel. Thank you so much for joining me today. Kaci Beeler out of the Hideout Theater in Austin, Texas. Thank you for joining me. Lindsay Goldapp out of Stomping Ground Comedy in Dallas, Texas. Thank you for joining me. And Tina Jackson out of Bexar Stage here in San Antonio, Texas. Thank you all for your incredible insight. Thank you for all the Twitch users who joined in and watched us and submitted questions today. Much appreciated. One thing that I want to say.
All the comments are saying part 2.
Oh, but yeah, great. Absolutely. We're gonna have to.
Leave them wanting
couple-
more, ladies.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We're not gonna have any problem finding amazing ladies in Texas. I mean, that's not going to be a problem for us.
Thanks.
No, it's a lot.
A few things that I want to say. Our next show is going to be on Friday at 6 o'clock, same time. We'll be talking about character. I hope that you guys join us in for that. That'll be fantastic. I also want to mention that things in this world are a little bit crazy right now. And every improv theater across the entire country is in a little bit of pain right now. So, well, let's see. So if you happen to be in the Austin area, hey, why not buy a show at the Hideout Theater in Austin, Texas? Go to their website, maybe give them a donation.
So
Yeah,
much online content.
I'm doing
absolutely,
3
yeah.
shows every week with a parallelogram of phonograph. So
Crazy. I love
Look
it.
at
So
Hideout
you're
website
still
too.
busy. Nothing's stopping you. If you're in the Dallas area, why not visit Stomping Ground Comedy's website?
Why not?
Yeah, why not do that? Yeah.
We're gonna be making up songs on Friday night, and for donations, it's crazy. Based on whatever you say, it's crazy. I don't know.
That sounds like an amazing way to support some local theaters. And if you're in San Antonio, Texas, and you're a member of this community, or if you're watching from somewhere else in the world, go to bearstage.com, and there's a link there where you can also support that theater as well. Thank you all for joining me. Support local comedy, support local theaters,
Thank you,
and
Rick.
I wish
Thank you.
everybody a great night.
Thank you.